So it's very important that I physically hold this because last year I forgot it. So when I was presenting the gold medal, it was only at the very last minute I realised I didn't actually have the gold medal with me, which was slightly embarrassing and confusing for the recipient. So very, very briefly, I'm delighted to announce the successful nominee for the 2007 ASME Gold Medal. So in an outstanding field of competition, the contribution of Ling of IMU, the International University of Malaysia, stands out as visionary. So Ling has worked tirelessly over, I think, at least 25 years to create and develop the IMU. And the thinking behind IMU was to produce doctors for a country that had a chronic shortage of doctors at the time and no sort of well-developed medical education setup. So Ling's vision was to set up partnerships with now 37 universities across the world so that IMU students do the first part of their degree programme in country, then they go to the partnership universities across the world to do their clinical years before coming back to Malaysia to practice. And I know the programme very well because Aberdeen has always taken IMU students, and I know that there's a number of people in this room who also take IMU to their universities as well. So they're a very familiar part of the undergraduate population in many UK medical schools. And I do remember teaching IMU students as well when I used to teach communication skills. We had like a bridging course, and we would teach a lot of communication skills and these poor students trying to teach them the colloquialisms of the northeast of Scotland so that they could do things like get a bus and understand what their patients were saying. And I think they found it quite challenging, but I think they were reassured by the fact that although I'm from Glasgow, when I moved to Aberdeen, I didn't actually understand what people were saying. So they weren't quite so disadvantaged as they thought. And one of the things with the partnership universities is that there is an annual meeting of an academic council for the partner schools. And so there's spin-offs for those that are involved in taking IMU students because there's this amazing networking opportunity once a year where you get to meet your equivalents from many universities across the world. And when I was thinking about this morning, it was the networking that struck me that medical education is a very small world. And in UK medical education, most people know most people, but similarly, it ripples out as well. And there's that game, what is it, the 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. And I thought, I know you're thinking, where's she going with this one? But, Ling has won the gold medal here in 2017. And if you look at the little flyer in your packs, in 2007, the first recipient of the gold medal was John Simpson from the University of Aberdeen. And John and Ling are very good friends. They've known each other for years. He was also my first Dean of Medical Education, and I now hold the John Simpson Chair. So I think we're although Ling and I didn't actually meet till last night, we've only had 2 degrees of separation for about 15 years, so we know all about each other. And if you go around the room, I bet that most of you know most of you with just 1 or 2 degrees of separation. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Ling and present her with the medal, and then ask her to speak to us. Thank you, everyone. I think we'll get the photograph taken.
Oh, we have to have a photo taken, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much.
Not at all. Shall I take that?
Yes, please. Well, good morning. Thank you for being here. Actually, I'm terribly honored, and I became very fretful when I was told I got this award because I looked at all the famous people, all the renowned medical educationists that got it. And I was going on, there's Ron Harden, Norcini, of course, John Simpson, and then there's Kees van Luton. I mean, all these are so famous. Then my husband just got so fed up with me. He turned to me and said, "Are you questioning the ability of the panel that chose you?" And that put an end to everything. But the concern is still in my heart that I'm not, I'm not sure that I belong to the same league, but perhaps in a different way. And here is where I wish to share with you what the 25-year journey has been like for us at IMU. I start off by showing photos of Malaysia, which I'm sure many of you see it in all the adverts of Uniquely Malaysia. And First question, why did we start the IMU? It was so simple, just not enough doctors. At that time, it was like 1 doctor to 2,700 persons. And the tragedy was there's so much human waste, resource wastage, because people were capable of doing medicine, people wanted to do medicine, but there were limited places in public universities, and the entry qualifications were very high, not because they needed to have 4 A's, but simply because of demand and supply. And those who could get a place overseas often could not afford it. So, great demand for doctors, students wanting to do it, but not able to do so. Now, I'm going to lead up to this thing which I call in sociological terms, a conjuncture of events. What that really means is that when something starts, it is a certain number of things coming together at the same time. The right people, the right environment, the right circumstances. And so I now need to describe to you the type of people we were. Because I think in any startup, people are really, really important. So who were we? 2 social scientists. Honestly, a most improbable pair to start a medical school. What credibility in 2 social scientists wanting to start a medical school? There was Kamal Saleh. I worked very closely with him. He's a regional scientist. He was very much an ideas person, a visionary. You can't keep up with him because of his ideas, and you have to pull him down to earth. So you need a person like me, a bit dictatorial, but pragmatic, very tenacious, implemented with the eye to details, and making him see the reality of things. And of course, I love being with people. We were young academics. That was important. You know, we had no reputation to protect. We were daring, we were idealistic. We had just come back from overseas. We thought we could change the world. And here we were at USM, University Science Malaysia in Penang, which was actually a hotbed of very radical socialistic academics. So we wanted to make a difference. We're very clear about that. And we were so daring. We were prepared to push boundaries. And there's a lot to be said about youth. When I look back now, I don't think I would ever do it at this age or anywhere when I was 50s. I was then only about 30, 39. So who were we? I will continue with that. We needed some medical-related people. So we had Saidi and Ong, both of them idealistic and again very conceptual. But they had the experience of starting the medical school in USM. Then, my favorite photo of Ron. He was tough. He was never, ever willing to give up on his ideas. And I chose that photo because he was always like that with me. He'll push me into the wall. Look, you got to do this, 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 this. And that was Ron. And you need a person like that. But then his partner, Ian, was a gentle persuader. And here those of you who knew these terrible twins would know how marvelous they were together. One that was pushy, difficult, and the other that was telling you the softer ways of doing things. So now we had the medical educationists to give us the confidence. We were the intrepid force. But then that's not good enough. We got to have people to run the medical school. So we persuaded John Beck from Dundee, who's just retired, to be the founding dean. And then Sir Patrick Forrest, who was a surgeon from Edinburgh, to join us. He had actually come to assess us for Edinburgh, but we ended up persuading him to join this innovative project. And they were fun because they were so different. All of you will know how different a pathologist is compared to a surgeon. And I was a young person trying to deal with the two of them when they disagreed on the curriculum and so on. But what was right in Malaysia then was the open educational environment. There were a large number of pre-university students who just could not get into local universities. There was a great demand for higher education, and the government had made a decision that Malaysia should be an educational hub. So the educationists were allowed to innovate. And the concept of twinning, which means you take a curriculum from a university elsewhere and you implement it in Malaysia, was actually born in Malaysia. So we had all these things like 2+1. That means 2 years in Malaysia, 1 year in the home university. But it's a curriculum of the home university. And credit transfer, which is what IMU is. We design our own curriculum that will fit into a variety of medical schools, and that's called credit transfer because the curriculum that we have designed is accepted by all the other schools who see it as their own. So I think this environment is very, very critical. And so the IMC, C for college, because we were only a college then, model was born. Very simple idea, completely unique at that time. Phase 1, 2.5 years medical sciences in Malaysia. Then the credit transfer, 2 years or 3 years to a partner medical school. Immediately you can see it was a saving for parents of nearly half the tuition fees. Okay, our curriculum now looks like, well, it's all been said and everything else, the SPICES model and so on. But remember, this was done 25 years ago, 26 years ago when we first designed it. Then the beauty of it, and it's something I think all of us here know, nothing like starting on a clean slate. When you don't have a whole group of anatomists, a whole group of pathologists all insisting their part must be in the curriculum. So with a clean slate, we asked Ron and Ian, okay, what do you see the curriculum of tomorrow? And they did it, and we worked on it. So how did we get our stakeholders to buy in? Actually, this was really tough. I had very little experience in that. It was just the need to build the confidence. First, the government. And you know what governments are like? When there's no precedence, it's really difficult for them. They can only work on the concept of precedence. So we worked with the Minister of Education, tell him this is real, persuaded him. We worked with the Minister of Health. They were all pretty open, we were lucky. And most important, the two critical people, you know what they call Director General. That is the term in Malaysia. Basically, it means the head of the professional part of education and the head of the professional part of health. I think you call it the chief medical officer here, the equivalent. Okay, they were supportive, but the buy-in was necessary. So we worked with the government to make sure that this project was accepted. And then we had to work with the partner schools. And most important, someone had to sponsor the students to come into the school, and that were the parents. And they said, you know, if this idea is so good, why hadn't it been done before? I mean, why is it only you trying to do it? And there was so much credibility we had to create to make them believe. And of course, we were only lodged in a shop house at that time, a shop lot, because we hadn't got our school, our physical facilities yet. And later, when the students graduated, the parents shared with us, they checked us out. They checked it with the registrar of companies and found we were only a $2 company, you know, when we first started. But anyway, it was the buy-in that was critical. But we were clear when we worked with the partner schools that we did not want to hawk this project. We didn't want no from any medical school. So we had to choose deans that were forward-looking, who were prepared to take risks, who were at heart educationists. And there was a lot of working on old school ties, because with old school ties, there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of faith, there's a lot of goodwill. So you just need to get the first few, make sure it works, and then after that, you can continue to expand. And very important at that time, the NHS hospitals had a lot of spare clinical places. So who were these partners? I need to show you. Some of you may recognize the people in the photos. Some will know this had been the past deans, maybe more than 2 degrees and more, right? So I won't name them, but this is the second academic council, which Jen mentioned, where we got all the deans to come together to discuss the IMU for 3 days at IMC. We were IMC then. Now, our partners, what we wanted was to create affordable, that means cheaper, and more opportunities for students. And in our minds, we knew we had to diversify. We wanted a diverse group of doctors trained in different countries, different continents, because we really believed if they came back and worked in Malaysia, that added to the richness of our healthcare provision. You know, people trained in America, in Canada, in Australia, in UK, and so on. The other thing we were very sensitive about is we wanted as many as possible in order to cope with policy changes. Policy can change with changing deans. You all know that. it can change with the Vice Chancellor, who suddenly decides he wants to have a branch campus somewhere else, and let's forget about IMU. And of course, the government of the country. We have weathered so many storms in UK and Australia and Canada and even America because of government policy changes. Because as you know, training doctors is a highly political issue. And we see the governments change from Conservative to Labour, something will happen. Labour changing back to Conservative, something else will happen. So it's to be able strategically to deal with this sort of changes, that there will always be places for our students. Now, what I just plotted out here is to just give you an idea of the different partners that we had had. Some of them are still with us, some have left us for the reasons I brought up. So, 92, one dramatic year was 93. 92, we didn't have enough places, so we went to look for more partner schools. Ian Hart was working in Canada, and he brought the whole Canadian contingent to join us. And before we knew what, at the Academic Council, the whole table had turned from not enough places to too many partner places. And then all the partners insisted they be given a quota. Like Royal College of Surgeons, they were going to give us 20. So they say, okay, now you have to give us 10, and so forth. So, you know, in all this, you must be fleet of foot. Anything can happen, and to look for ways and means to solve the issues. And I suppose the latest, if you go up to 2015, is Swansea University. You see, for Malaysia, it's very important, because IMU is there, that every university, every medical school that we're linked to must be recognized by the Malaysian Medical Council. So, I just want to highlight some key milestones. The college was started in 1922. Our first cohort, 93. Very dramatic. Then I had to persuade all the deans. We want to do a double intake. They said, double intake for medicine? Never done before in a year. My argument was very simple. Our pre-university results come up from A-levels, IB, the Malaysian STPM. It was a huge variety that we had, the Australian SAM and so on. And the students are coming out throughout the year. Why don't you allow me to have 2 intakes where then I can take the cream of the crop from all these pre-university? So they were persuaded, they watched, we took it, and then very critically, in 96, everyone wanted to know how the students, when they transferred, how they performed. We had questionnaires for the students, we had questionnaires for the clinicians to see how they did. Because once the feedback came and the deans were satisfied the quality was good enough, if not better. At that time, actually, they were better because our curriculum was far ahead of all our partner schools. Academic council that used to be twice a year became only once because the deans were comforted that we were doing the right thing. So in 97, we started B-Pharm and we had university status finally in 1998, but that was triggered by the Asian financial crisis. Anyway, just to give you an idea, IMEC, which is our medical education conference, started in 2004, and a whole slew of health sciences programs came on board during that period. But more exciting, we started alternative medicine. Now you can imagine something like Chinese medicine and something like chiro. When we started it, we had lots of calls from very established doctors in Malaysia who said, what are you doing? This is not evidence-based. You're bringing a bad reputation to allopathic medicine. But our argument was very straightforward. Number one, health is holistic. We know in Malaysia, so many people go to allopathic doctors, but they also go to the traditional Chinese medicine or the Malay medicine and so on. And we wanted to professionalize these professions because there was an act coming in Malaysia called the TCM, Traditional and Complementary Medicine Act. And we want to make sure that all our students were linked to partner schools who were recognized, who were of high quality and accredited. And that's why we started that. And we started healthcare, the clinics. You couldn't have dentistry without a dental clinic. You could not have chiro without the chiro clinic, and so forth. And very exciting, 2016, finally, we were given approval to start our academic health center, which of course will have ACCs to feed into the hospital. This is a very important picture because that's the year that we were allowed to start IMC, the Minister of Education. And that's how we looked. It was a building that we only had 3 months to renovate and start the course. Our first batch of doctors, thin, gawky, everything else. Now many of them are all specialists around the world, but mostly in Malaysia. And interesting, many have become entrepreneurs from the first batch. This is when we got our university status in 98. As I said, it was triggered by the Asian financial crisis. Over here is an interesting picture. You will see in there the pink building, which was, when we had enough money, we bought that. And we went there in year 2000. And you can see the plot of land on the white colored land on the right. That's where the hospital is coming up. So this is what IMU looked in year 2000. That's how it looks. When we earned enough income, we invested into it, and we built the second wing, which is the one on your right. Okay, and that was the podium, and this is how it looks when you go towards it. Now, it was an outcomes-based curriculum, and really, we told Ron, look, this is really a test of the outcomes-based, because why did our students succeed? When I reflect on it, and when I talk to them, and when we talk to our partner schools, the first thing is the intense motivation they have. And many of you who've had our students will always understand that. Whether they were financed by their parents or by sponsors or by the government, huge motivation to succeed. Number 2 is the adaptability. Just think, you move over 2.5 years. You don't even end up with your friend in that particular partner school because it goes through a match. And your best friend might be going to Canada and you could end up in Australia. So you don't have your family, you don't have your friends, and you land up in this medical school. The language is a bit different. The slangs, as I'm told, from Scotland to Ireland to Northern England, down to London, the Australian shrine. So they had to cope with all that. And a clinical environment that was utterly new. They did not know their professors either. So think, if we have succeeded, the curriculum must have made them very adaptable, very flexible, and pretty resilient. I mean, all the things we want doctors to be. Of course, underlying it all was the progressive curriculum. You see, you got to make them better than the ones, the medical schools they're going to, so they are more ready than the ones at home, because they're struggling with so many other transitional issues, adapting issues. And I think the experiential learning that we embedded in IMU through IMU Cares, where they had to go out and do a fair bit of charity, I think also helped them in that. Some of the trials and tribulations, the Asian financial crisis. Strathclyde helped, our ringgit went up ridiculously to 8 ringgit to £1. Parents were coming to IMU crying, what are we going to do? We had planned on 4 ringgit. Strathclyde, because they took about 100 pharmacy students on a special track, the principal made it 4 ringgit and 80 to help us during that period. And the moment we pegged the ringgit, everything calmed down. But what the partner schools helped us with was that if a student was sent to UK and couldn't afford it, we diverted that student to Australia where it was cheaper. So there was a lot of give and take among the partners, and they were prepared to do everything to help the students. Then we had to start the clinical school because that allowed a pathway. We had always planned it, but we were quite happy doing what we were. We thought we will stabilize everything before we started it. But with the Asian financial crisis, we had no choice. We had to start the clinical school. So we started that in Seremban about 28 miles away from KL. The hospital that we've used for student exposure, we used it for our clinical training. So that again made our degree far cheaper than coming to a partner school overseas. But what we will always face is the lack of housemanship places from Australia. There was a lot of talk about F1, F2 in UK being not available for foreign students. These are things that we have to deal with all the time. And of course, so dramatic, about 3 years ago, I think, the international cap was suddenly put on all the medical schools. And some of our partners just had to cut back from 16 to 2. But the drama was those students were already in our stock because we have to take the students 2.5 years before they actually transfer. But here again, you look at the power of partnership. We wrote to the Australian schools. We wrote to the Irish schools. We wrote to the American and Canadian school. Please help with a few. And for them to give 1 or 2 was a bit of a stretch depending on the school. But they did it. And that helped us weather the storm. And now, of course, a lot of uncertainty with the lifting of the cap. But I'm just giving you some of the UK dramas. I have not even talked about the American, Canadian, Australian dramas that we had to face. So this is the IMU track. Same 2.5 years in IMU, outcomes-based. They go to a partner school or they go to the clinical campus. These are our partners, and that includes the Chinese medicine, traditional medicine of Beijing, Shanghai, and so on, and of course the chiropractic schools. Now, what are the outcomes of IMU? Of course, the real test is the quality of the students. But in terms of numbers, we have over 5,000 medical graduates, half of which have been produced by the partner schools, half through our own IMU MBBS track. We have about 3,000 pharmacy graduates, 200 dental, 1,000 over health sciences, and 400 masters and PhD. And one thing we did find when we started our research component, when we were ready for it and had money to put into it, the lecturers that came also were, when we asked them why did they join IMU, it was always because you've got research. They love teaching, but we had research. So it was you're getting a different group of people as well. So where are our alumni? Now this has been really difficult. This year we've been starting the tracking of our alumni, and we find that 42%, this is preliminary data, has actually remained in our country. Now, I know you can never keep everyone back. That was our plan. That's what we had hoped. But that will never be the case because everyone is so global now. And these students are trained all over the world. What do you expect? But at least we got 40% back in our country to serve our country. And as you can see, Singapore, Australia, US, and UK are big for our students that have remained. In pharmacy, about 90% are Malaysia because it's the accreditation issue. And for your interest, you look, of those working in Malaysia for pharmacy, 74% are in private. But with medicine, you will notice 61% are in the government sector. But this will include those who are still doing the housemanship. Okay? So this will give you a sense of it. Now, as you expect, there are huge challenges. It's a growing organization, and it will have all the problems of a growing organization. Complacency has set in. We can see it. Amu and I can definitely see it because we've been there from the early years. Staff are fearful of risks. They want to protect IMU's name. They daren't do new things. There's lack of agility. There's a tendency to a silo mentality as departments grow. There is very little entrepreneurial spirit left. And it does stifle imagination and innovation. Now, to be sustainable, we have to have international benchmarking, which we are getting to some extent through the partner schools. But I think we also won the McJanet Prize for civic work. Much to our surprise, we said, why don't we just learn, try for it? And we beat 65 other medical schools throughout the world. And I think we had the ASME award for student engagement. And now we are embarking on the USMLE, What we want is all our students in IMU starting in August this year to sit the USMLE. And we're working with a group, the Becker group, to offer this to our students. And we will also offer to all our alumni and the stock of students with us, except that that group who starts in August will have it free. So that will be quite challenging for us, but we found that the curriculum is so similar. We have to embrace diversity. That's the very essence of IMU. Our staff, 47 countries, our student, 45 different countries. We have to be open to ideas and feedback and willing to learn and share. And I think we have been very lucky because we are IMU. A lot of the partners have come and shared things with us. Perhaps sometimes they may not share among themselves because they don't have the opportunity or whatever, but when they come to IMU, these are the deans from all these different countries, and they're not necessarily in a conference where they're among the people who are in their specialty, except they're all people who are running medical schools or running the medical program. And so we have been able to learn from them, and in some cases we have been able to test out ideas because we're small, for them to take it back to their universities to implement. And you cannot do exciting things unless you educate the regulators, and that is a serious problem in Malaysia. So what must we do? I think our curriculum is getting terribly out of date. That's my feeling. We have to convince the academics. I mean, in this day and age of technology and AI, robotics and all, more than ever, you have to develop humanities and the soft skills in our doctors. Organizational, we have to be flat. I think all of you are familiar with it, drive change, and the core values of ethics and altruism must be embedded. And the most exciting part immediately is the IMU Health Center, Academic Health Center, because this will be our hospital. We are able to do the things like patient-centeredness, values-based healthcare in our own hospital, for which we've trained students. At the moment, we're using the government hospital. There's a limited control we have with that. So that will prove a very exciting thing. Concluding remarks. IMU has been a very disruptive model, and one of the senior deans had always told me, it is actually a very subversive model. Because what we are able to show is it is a very, actually it's I would even say a low-cost model when you analyze it. Because you use the government facilities, you pay for that part, not the government, we only pay the clinicians who teach for us that are in the hospital. But we have to work very hard with the hospital to get them to buy in with us being there. Okay, and the variety of entry qualifications that we have taken. And certain studies are coming out by IMU to show that even if you don't have the high entry qualifications of 4 A's or 3 A's and a B at A level, the students make it, but they may not make it for the first exam, they catch up at the second and third exam. Now, a lot of our medical schools here will not have the opportunity to push the entry qualifications down, but we were able to. So now we have like 5,000 records. We want to move into looking at the longitudinal study of our students and entry qualifications and so on. But most critically, I think it's open health professions and medicine, dentistry to a wider population. So we are a long way from what Dr. Razak was talking about yesterday, Salim Razak, on social accountability and all. We are just actually at the most infant stage. But maybe this is pointing out to third world countries, to very poor countries, there's another way of doing medicine. It may not be the high-end research-based type, but if you need doctors, there may be another proven way. Thank you very much.
That was extremely interesting. Do we have questions for Meili? We've got 5 minutes for questions. Val?
Oh dear.
Is there a microphone or shall I just shout? Thank you very much indeed. I was from the UK, and thank you, Ling, for being, well, you've always been a heroine of mine, but it was so inspiring. And it was just lovely to see the whole story of how you developed. So I was particularly struck when you said there's nothing like a clean slate for starting a curriculum. And also you emphasised the silo mentality we're in. It reminded me of the Lancet report in 2010, which clearly says that 20th century medical education is not fit for purpose for the 21st century. And we're seeing that in our workforce now and the struggle we're having to try and direct medical education to produce the type of doctor we need. So we're in an interesting situation in the UK because we've got private medical schools coming up. We've got universities perhaps not prepared to take the risk. Do you think that if we're going to actually move forward and deliver those sustainable development goals, that we really need to turn the thing, have a clean slate and all start again? Do you think the medical school, private medical schools will be our disruptive technology and really challenge the universities to change? Or what do you think we should be doing?
They could be, you know, because I think, you know, Amu and I have been discussing at IMU, it's getting so hard to change the thinking, you know, because they've been successful. And they say, why is there a need to change? You know, our students are doing well. By the way, I mean, we just got fantastic news. The top student in Dundee this year was an IMU student. The top student in Aberdeen, Rona just wrote to me to say it was also an IMU student. So, you know, when this sort of thing gets back to our faculty, they will say, why are you creating trouble, you know? It's okay. But my point is, it is not okay. You know, now look at the students using the handheld, and we are pushing like crazy for the flipped classroom. You know, the students are going to get so bored with us. So my point is, clean slate is the easiest to do. Because to get buy-in for faculty is not easy. It's really tough. I mean, we had that fantastic run simply because we had a clean slate. We didn't have to persuade people. Okay, the only ones we had to persuade were the deans. And there were AC members who came from very traditional curriculum in Ireland that felt that we had to have so many lectures on anatomy and on just the knee. Okay? But the other deans were there to rubbish it, you know, so we didn't have to fight for it. So it's true. I feel unless, you know, the whole school is really caught up and believe that they have to change. If most of them believe they have to change and there's a will to change, then that can happen because the descendants will be dragged along screaming. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, you were just talking about curriculum changing and starting with a clean slate. Do students have much input in the curriculum at IMU?
Good question.
Well, they do. They are in our curriculum committees and all. I mean, that was a great thing, you know. When we started IMU, we had all these deans from all over the world, and the Americans are very progressive. They have their students in practically every committee they have. So they told us to do it. And yet in Malaysia, no one would ever dream of having a student in the Senate or, you know, even in the academic council. So, yes, the answer is you do need the students' input. And the IMU students are very good. I work very closely with them on different things, and they are very honest, very critical.
Thank you.
I mean, they are the users, you know. Yeah.
I'm afraid we have no more time for questions to me, Ling, at this particular point in time. But of course, we have coffee times, we have lunch times, we have break times, and I know that she'll be delighted to take your questions if you have anything that you want to follow up on. But thank you again, and congratulations to our gold medal winner. It's in the little bowl.